Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to Northwest, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Career Services Assistant Director Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, Director of Career Services here at Northwest. And we are wearing twin polos
We
today.
are, yes. And you
Advantage
may
polos.
notice there's no guest today. So this is actually our going to be our finale episode of the Behind the Bearcat podcast as we transition out of it into new things. So just the two of us, kind of like the first episode, we're going to bookend. It was meet the hosts, and now it's say goodbye to the hosts, I guess, as we move through. So yes, so series finale of the Behind the Bearcat podcast today. So been a long journey, lots of time. I did the math. We have 154 episodes total that we did, which that seems like a lot over the course of 6 seasons. So definitely we've been at this for a long time. Seems like, you know, we started before COVID, then COVID changed the way we did it and made it a lot easier for from my side of things as we moved into it. So yes. So
So tell me, my ask for this episode was maybe let's talk through memorable moments or
mhm.
memorable guests. What maybe were your top three moments or guests? So you can
Yeah.
go first, Travis.
Yeah, so I think that, like I say, we started out in the Wells Hall podcast studio, which was a space that I had found out about through my faculty member friends that are over there. And I think that very first episode with just the two of us, we had talked about doing the podcast. And if a little behind the scenes for you, the genesis of the Behind the Bearcat podcast was Hannah was standing in my doorway. She was the assistant director at that time. I was the internship coordinator, and I was talking about being in radio and doing that for years. And she's like, "We should do a podcast," and that's literally how it started. It took a little bit more work than that, but it really just a simple one-off conversation kind of started it all. So that very first episode where it was just you and I in the podcast studio trying to figure out how it works, how to do this. I hadn't done radio type stuff for at that point. I started at Northwest in 2008. That was, over 10 years since I'd done radio. So it's like it'd been trying to figure out how those muscles worked again. So that was memorable in a good way and then in a scary way as well for me. So yeah, that one was really good kind of to get our bearings and figure out our rhythm. And I feel like that's the one thing over the 6 seasons that I think has made this the easiest for me is that we have kind of a natural rhythm. You're a really good interviewer, a good question asker. That allows me to kind of focus on the technical stuff and then pepper in comments, almost like a color commentator in a sports broadcast, which that's a role that I very much appreciate. So that first one, we were kind of figuring that out. So I think that was the most memorable. Pretty hard to forget the first one, of course.
The thing that saved me with the career services job was you at that point there was a policy on campus you had to do a phone screener interview first before you came in
And we all
person
know that you're really good at talking
on
on
the
the phone or
phone.
on the radio,
Yeah.
right? So you already
Yeah.
have that kind of big first advantage.
Yeah, and I think that's what really was the difference maker for me because I was kind of awkward in the in-person interview. I had experience doing that. I'd interviewed people for like our Distinguished Scholars Day. We had students come in, we'd have to interview. But to actually get to do a phone interview and be in kind of that comfort zone of, okay, they're just hearing my voice. I was in my home office, in very comfortable clothes. I took the day off that day. So it was very, very relaxed atmosphere and I felt really comfortable. And I think that came through. And I think that's why they gave me a second glance because I certainly didn't have the best qualifications of anybody that applied. I only had a bachelor's degree, not a master's, which wasn't required, but
I
I
think for
think,
my wait, hold on. I think for
yeah.
myself, so for those first few episodes, one of the moments that always I come back to is Pat Immel. So if I
Hmm.
remember correctly, he's wearing his Packers ball cap or
He
whatever.
absolutely was. Yes.
And we're in the podcast studio, and I remember doing this interview with him, and he's retired. This is so crazy, like in the
Hmm.
in the course of all of these things. He's retired. He retired at the end of last academic year. He's a professor emeritus.
Hmm.
I mean, which is pretty much the highest rank you could ever attain on a college
Hmm.
campus, right? And but to go back to his interview, talking through like when he was in college, he didn't know what he wanted to major in. He didn't even know that the thing he wanted to major in was a major. And
Right.
then he didn't know what things were called. He didn't know, kind of a first gen college student experience. And I think one of the things that was so powerful for me was really just to hear him talk about kind of fumbling his way through. And I think everybody feels like, other people are successful because they have some sort of path through life. In
Mhm.
reality, he did such an amazing job of just talking about how, hey, I'm just kind of showing up every day. I'm wandering through life. And to have a career where you advance through the levels, you become a full professor, now you retire, you're a professor emeritus, and just to see that you don't have to have a plan, or you don't even have to be aware of things, as long as you're, kind of just genuinely moving forward and trying to show up as your best every day.
And I didn't realize that you could change your major. I was like the first person in my family to go to college. So I didn't have, I mean, my parents really supported me, but they
Didn't know how
like my
things
kids
worked.
now, we can give them a lot better uh, tips and what to do and what to look for and how to navigate through. But I just didn't have that. So I ended up finishing my broadcasting radio TV film degree, and then I had way more classes. I could have had a double major. I know I could have. So now about halfway through my theater career at UW Oshkosh, I realized it's like I kind of like showing people what to do, and I like teaching people. And I asked, it's like, okay, what do you have to do to be a college professor? Okay, well, you got to go get master's degree, Master of Fine Arts.
It's interesting you mentioned Pat's episode because that's my favorite story from the podcast is from Pat's episode. When he talks about being a manager at KFC and his now wife Terry, who is, the in the computer science area, was a manager at a rival KFC, and kind of their story. That's like still that was like episode 3 of
True
season 1,
romance.
and still one of my favorite stories ever. Yes, so that's a really strong one as well. So yeah, Pat's episode, definitely a good one. I'll make sure to link to the full episode of it. If you haven't checked that out, check it out. Plus, you can see the early camera work of pre-COVID and how we did that as well.
Yeah, I mean that's my first real job, but my first real job where I got hired and was at Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, and I think I worked there for like 8 or 9 or 10 years.
Was
And
that out of high school or while
just
you were
pretty
in?
much out of high school, yeah. So when I was doing the band thing, I was also doing KFC.
Ah, gotcha.
So, but yeah,
KFC in the day,
oh
band guy at night.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's where I met my wife Terry. She managed one store, I managed another store, and so when Terry listens to this, I had the better store. But
I
you
don't know.
know,
I've heard otherwise.
yeah, and it is a bone of contention. But yeah, I had a better store.
The
Uh,
warring, the
yeah,
warring of the
yeah,
KFCs.
oh yeah, it got intense. But yeah, I mean, I haven't worked at KFC in like 23 years,
Do
but I
you eat
still,
at KFC
oh
ever?
yeah. What, seriously, look at me. I eat at KFC, but I still, I mean, it got me through college. It got me, I learned things. I learned how to make chicken, but you learn how to be an employee and to work and do a good job. And, so I mean, I'm thankful for that. And, that's just, I did my time in fast food. I mean, if you don't have to do fast food ever, God love you.
Yeah, I think for me, another really memorable one. Prior to coming to career services, I was an admissions representative, and we've talked about that. If you've listened to the podcast for any amount of time, you've heard that story, and how Kristen and I both are admissions people. But having Jeremy Waldire on, who was my former supervisor and boss, was a little like meta and surreal for me to have him on, in to hear just to hear kind of his perspective. It was just a different way to talk to someone that that you used to report to. So that was definitely an interesting interview for me, just because again, I'm doing the interview with my current boss talking to my former boss about working in general, and it was just kind of like, oh, this doesn't happen all the time. This is a unique kind of situation for sure.
Inception.
Yes.
Layers, going layers and layers.
Just being frank, I'm a pleaser. Like I like to please everyone and keep everybody happy. And so sometimes having those frank conversations about staff who were not pulling their weight, that was always kind of tough. And it was a good experience, but I'm not going to lie, those are still conversations that I struggle with. Not my favorite thing to do, but it has made me a little more comfortable in that environment.
Hmm.
But again, I think that was the biggest difference is being a self motivator that can help you move up the ladder a little faster in that type of environment.
Yeah. How about you? What's one of your favorite stories or one of the memorable ones that you have from the mini? You got 152
I
left
know
to
to
choose
choose
from.
from. Um, I have to say, my all-time favorite episode of all time, was definitely Corson.
Okay.
Did you bleep Corson's cursing out, or did you edit it out mostly?
I believe there are a couple of bleeps in there, yes, which I had to
Um,
figure out how to do because again, that's not something you do a lot, especially
it
in
was
small town radio.
it was Travis's technical journey that, he was like, I've never had to bleep out cursing before.
Mhm.
He talks about growing up in San Francisco. He talks about, being in a tank battalion, leading a tank battalion. He's such a smart guy. He was a general. Like, I don't know. There are just so many good nuggets in that Corson episode. And I thought it was funny. And I don't know. For some reason, it was just super memorable to me, sort of the life lessons again from all of this varied experience that he had.
Another unforecasted blessing. So I applied for the political science department, history and geography. I'd never had a geography course. The other guys weren't interested. Geography gave me the job. And what I learned was, once again, this was something I didn't know I was going to love, but I did love it because geography is a synthesizing discipline. You know, my specialties were political geography. You take political science, give it a spatial focus, you get political geography. Military geography, take military science, give it a spatial focus, you get military geography. So synthesizing discipline. And I never got bored. I mean, no matter, I've taught so many different things, regional courses and military geography, political geography, just all sorts of stuff. And I never get bored. Um, and so it worked out to be great.
Yeah, that was definitely a memorable one for sure. That was a fun one to edit too, because again, new challenges with that. I think too, one of the things, in the intro, I think we try to, or in the intro, I try to kind of get the point of the podcast across. But I think it's important for us to kind of talk about like, why we decided to do this. Again, it started as a doorway conversation, but really that was part of a bigger conversation we were having about how career services is kind of uniquely positioned at Northwest to where we work with everybody. We work with all academic areas, we work with student affairs, we work with alumni. I mean, we really, every stakeholder for the university, our office touches in some way. So the idea of the podcast was kind of to do that. So to me, also some of the interesting ones and some of the ones that maybe didn't go the way I expected them to were student interviews and then some alumni interviews. We definitely had some very interesting journeys with both of those. Andrew Wagley's story about being fired from Hy-Vee was one of those really strong ones. And it's interesting when I was talking to some friends about recording this and that we were going to talk about stories. The very first thing that came up was, "Oh, well, are you going to bring up Wagley's getting fired from Hy-Vee story?" So, so that's definitely a memorable one for some listeners too. So that was a really strong one. That was just a great interview overall too. And Andrew's such a talented student, and now is such a talented professional. As a journalist, that was a really really good student interview that I'll never forget as well.
I worked there for about 2 months and then was fired actually. So I allegedly stole $2, which there's a whole story behind that if you have the time, I can tell it, but I feel like I've told it so many times. But essentially, they said I stole $2, and I did accidentally walk out of the store $2 because they didn't believe my story, and they fired me. So, and I was kind of like annoyed, and also like because it was just like I'd worked there for 2 years and 7 months, and I was like, if this would have happened in Raytown, like they would have understood, but I'm new up here, and
so you
this and
got
that.
no cred. You got no
there's
trust.
no
built up.
credibility. I know that like the store when I was working there, they said like they were losing like hemorrhaging money because their cash accountability was like just an oxymoron. So I think it was just a product of bad circumstance, but.
And then we had some alumni ones that were interesting as well. COVID helped, I think, open the door for those as well. So the transition from podcast studio, recording in the podcast studio was a challenge because it was really good audio because it's made for audio, but the video we had to basically have like 3 cameras set up, which was we had a student who was working with us. Thank goodness, you had a media student who was she your intern or was she just working for you as a student employee?
It was Justin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Justin
So
Wood. Shout out to Justin. I think he has an interview. Didn't we interview Justin?
yeah,
I don't
I think so.
I think we did. Maybe we can also link that in there.
Hmm.
Also an amazing student employee. He was an intern slash student employee here and was excellent at video, all things video. And so he did a great job of setting that video setup for us. But man, it was so much more complicated than just
Hmm.
hopping on Zoom and recording your screen. So I'm glad
Yep.
that we kind of did away with that just for the sake of ease of recording
Right.
things.
Yes. So yeah, so when we moved to Zoom, that definitely made life a lot easier, made it easier for us to cut it. And then it also gave us a chance, people who were away from Maryville, to be able to do it as well. So I remember like Tracy Steele's interview. I remember that. That was someone who we never, lived in California, doesn't come back to the Midwest or to Maryville often. So that was an interview. I don't know if I can cut a clip out of the Tracy Steele interview because I'm pretty sure he started talking after the intro and didn't breathe until an hour later when he finished. So I don't know if I can cut a clip out, but that I'll link that interview as well. That was a really good one too, and someone who had a really interesting journey to get to the career that he got to. And again, that's someone I don't think we would have discovered had we stayed in the podcast studio and we wouldn't have had to make the transition to Zoom.
To go back kind of we talked I talked about, not having a linear journey, but uh I think there was only one guest on our podcast, and you can tell me I'm wrong, who actually really had a linear journey, and that was, drum roll,
Dr. Ashley Black.
who was like, nope,
Yes.
never deviated from the plan. So out of 154 people surveyed, only one had a plan and executed and is living her executed plan. So hats off to you, Dr. Black. It was such an interesting, such a different experience, I think, to hear maybe someone's journey that was a little less circuitous, maybe. I'm sure it was no less interesting, but it was less circuitous for sure.
And I just remember having a really fun conversation in my English class with my peers and with my teacher, and just thinking, man, that was really fun. Like, I would love to find us a job where I can just read books and talk to other people about books. So that's kind of how it started for me. So when I went to college, I did go in studying English education. Luckily for me, I wasn't someone who changed their major a lot. I mean, I stuck with it. So
With the understanding that you were going to then teach
yes,
English.
yes. So I got an undergraduate degree in English education. I taught high school English for 4 years before I left the classroom to go back to graduate school.
Yeah, it was very interesting to me how many, especially of our faculty members that we interviewed, not only didn't start out wanting to be faculty members, but that had stories about their own faculty member or advisor or somebody who saw something in them that said, "Hey, you would be good at this and you should do that." We had so many get. I mean, I couldn't do all the clips from all the people that said that because we'd be here for 8 hours, but there were that was kind of a recurring theme. I felt like, especially with our faculty guests, was that somebody saw something in me and pointed it out, and I'd never considered this as an option, and now I do it and I love it. And I think that's really powerful. I think that's especially as a college student who feels like you have to have everything figured out from day one that you're on a campus. Like, that's not the way most people's jobs work. We all take different paths, we all do different things, we try things that don't work, and then
And then
eventually
you do
you'll
a
find the thing that
podcast about
sticks.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one other interview that I remember, and maybe it was because it was so silly and it was such a struggle bus, was we kind of learned probably that you should not interview people on Friday afternoons. Monday mornings and Friday afternoons were not the greatest time frame. And I remember when we had the interview with Dr. Riley about eating dry cocoa powder. I don't know what happened there, and I'm not sure how that came out, but there was some really weird and hilarious moment where I sort of shared about how I like to eat the cocoa mix dry. And I'm not really sure what happened there, but that was also a memorable reveal, I guess, on air.
But,
So here's actually what we did, Travis. We
Yeah.
did not have the peanut M&M trick. So they were capsules with the powder in them. And I really like making homemade hot cocoa mix, but I eat it dry. I actually don't make hot cocoa with it. I just eat it dry. So it's delicious and it has a strange texture. But I was able to like open up the capsule and I poured it in and she just ate it with her hot cocoa mix. So, you know, we made it work, but
see, there you go. There you
I'm
go.
shook, Hannah. I don't know if I can proceed with the interview. Like dry cocoa, like that's the
That
you could
that's
tell me
making
you
me
chewed
that's
on light
making me
bulbs and I wouldn't be
thirsty
more
just thinking
shocked than I
about
am
eating.
now. My goodness.
oh man,
Ooh,
we
this is what
promised
happens
that.
if you record on Friday, folks. This is a
I
bad
know, we
idea.
promised it would be a good interview and then we destroyed it. And also when I told, was it Clarence that I smoked at the age of 6? There was a few bombs in there. If anybody has watched all of those interviews, there's a few little tidbits in there like that. I don't think I've ever shared this before, so we'll just let it all hang out on this Friday on our final podcast. I was also the leader of my neighborhood gang, Clarence.
I wasn't the leader.
I was the leader. I mean, we had a smaller neighborhood. You know, we grew up in rural Missouri, but we burned the neighbor's playhouse down whenever I was 6 years old. Yeah, 7 years old.
What's the statute's limitation on arson, Clarence?
There is none. So we would be looking into. We were not that bad.
We were smoking cigarettes in the neighbor's yard and burned the playhouse down. You know, I was probably 8 years old, maybe. So yeah, we got some stories back there too.
On the season finale.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that whole Clarence interview was fascinating to me, like hearing about him trying to walk from the Kansas City airport.
That was a great story. Yeah.
First day, I came to campus. I actually, when I came here, I caught a bus to Kansas City, you know, and here's how goofy I was at the time. Looking at a map, it's not that far from Kansas City to Maryville, looking at a map, right? And I'm used to walking. You know, I lived in a city where you'd walk 30 blocks, 40 blocks, 50 blocks. So Clarence is walking from Kansas City to Maryville with his suitcase. Because that's all I brought with me was a suitcase, a few clothes. Luckily, someone saw me, gave me a ride, a football booster who had picked me up on my visit to Northwest, saw me, turned around and gave me a ride back to Maryville. Thank God. I had walked almost to St. Joseph from Kansas, but my mind, you know, I had never lived in a rural area. Our distance was not that fine to me.
Yeah, it was really good. And Clarence was, when we, again, a little behind the curtain for everybody listening and watching, when we do these interviews, you know, we ask, of course, because you don't just invite people. So you ask, would you like to do it? And we've been told no by some people that were heartbreakers for me that I really wanted. But if they say yes, then, you know, we'll send the things. And then usually you do the interview and it's done. You know, I tell them when they come out and things like that. But with Clarence, I had like 4 or 5 emails afterward about, you know, thank you for the interview. And there was, you know, you mentioned something that I hadn't thought about before, and it really kind of changed my thinking. And then, you know, he becomes interim president shortly thereafter. So that was a really cool, like, to see the effects of these conversations, that it's not just entertainment, which we hope it is, but it was also, you know, somebody in a really high level, you know, who's going to the highest level of the university. The conversation that we had, you know, maybe kind of changed their approach that they took and the way they thought about things. So that was really powerful, personally for me, just to kind of see that and see the power of these. And I also feel like, you know, moving to YouTube again, having those early seasons are kind of hit and miss for audio and video. So some of them are audio, some of them are video. If you go back and check them out, you'll kind of, on the YouTube channel, you'll see kind of some of them are a little, and even within a season, there might be 1 or 2 that are video and then some that aren't. That was really availability of students to do it. When we switched to Zoom, it did make a big difference. And, you know, the YouTube numbers, we've had over 5,000 views total on the podcast on YouTube over the 6 seasons, which you know is not insubstantial, especially considering the size of Northwest, and that we don't, you know, we kind of market it to our own people, but it's not like we're out there paying for ads and Squarespace isn't sponsoring this episode or anything like that, as nice as that would have been. So I feel like that's respectable for sure. I think one of our most popular episodes and the one that I got asked to do the most was Will Murphy's. Will is an institution at Northwest, and anybody who's gone through Wells Hall in any way, shape, or form knows how absolutely impactful Will is. So that interview was a really good one. Interestingly enough, though, the most technical guest we have was also probably the one that I was plagued by the most technical issues with. His mouth and words were really far off for some reason. I don't know if it was on his end or ours, but
Huh.
that was a real struggle. So I had him send me a lot of B-roll. So I got a lot better at editing B-roll after that podcast, trying to make it match up. So yeah, that was interesting that it's probably our most viewed single episode in video form, because that he's the TV guy and everybody he knows works in video. So that was interesting how that works.
Those 4 places over 20 years have worked into 27 workspaces that we have in the building now, including greatly expanded edit bays, podcasting studios, video that includes radio. So our live radio programs have cameras in the studios and they're broadcasting live via Twitch and Facebook. All kinds of theater spaces and others we've been able to build out in this building that gives such a variety. And what we tell students and what we see from students who are coming from other programs, because once or twice a year we get a student who comes in from an MU or an ISU or a University of Iowa, because they went there, they had a friend who came here, and their friend keeps sending them pictures of what they're doing, and they keep going, but they're not going to let me do that for 2 years, and our stuff isn't. And so there's not, I tell people a lot, there's not bad programs. Most of the programs I've been in have been great, and they're all tasked with some very specific things. There are a lot of places that do a news show and a sports show, and they might do that daily. And if you want to get into news, that is going to be a great experience for you. Here we have a strange niche in that we really let the students decide what they're going to do.
Any last takeaways that we have?
I think having conversations like this are super valuable. Again, our goal was to kind of introduce people to, introduce Northwest and students and, everybody at large in the Northwest family to people they may not interact with every day. And I feel like, 154 episodes, we've done that. We've kind of the whole gambit from the university president to to folks that are associate provosts, to faculty, to staff members, to students, to folks who work for our facilities team or in auxiliary services. So I feel like we tried to touch all corners of the university and kind of get a perspective of everyone. There are guests that we never did get that did get away, so that was a little sad. But I do feel like our mission of kind of introducing Bearcats to people they may not interact with, I feel like we've accomplished that over the last 6 seasons. As we transition away from the podcast and move into other things, I think that what we're hoping to do is kind of take that focus more external, maybe do more stuff with employers who are or aren't alumni, or folks from outside who are trying to give that. So the podcast was kind of intentionally internally focused. And I think as we move on from the podcast, we want to shift that to be externally focused. And I think that's a really cool opportunity to do some more stuff. We've certainly ramped up our events in career services, which is one of the reasons why we're sunsetting the podcast, because we're a lot busier than we used to be. But there's also opportunities for more stuff that we do with folks, who are further away, and doing Meet the Pros events and things like that. So I think, staying subscribed to the Career Services YouTube channel, or if you're not subscribed to it, doing that is a good idea, because there's good stuff coming, even if it's not this same podcast kind of format.
I wanted Travis to do a vlog, a career services vlog. I wanted it to be the Office style, sort of docudrama sort of thing, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm 100%.
He doesn't want to get fired
Right.
from Northwest.
Right. Yeah. And Northwest has done that with students to great success before. Courtney Rowe, she's now Miss Missouri. So congratulations.
There you
Courtney. She was, My Bearcat Life, I think, was the video series that she was doing for marketing, which is kind of how she got on our radar. And was another really strong student interview.
Now I'm also a Girl Scout. So I was at the time working on my Girl Scout Gold Award, which is like the equivalent of the Eagle Scout. So it's like the highest award you can get as a Girl Scout. And for my Girl Scout award, I was going to make a series of videos kind of as a preparation guide for finals week for college students and high school students, because during finals week, the suicide rates, like they go up. So I offered a survival guide talking about sleep, nutrition, all of that good stuff, and how those factors factor into your mental health, and how, you know, if you are aware of those things, know what, like, do what you need to do, you'll succeed during finals week. And it's always easier to hear it from a peer rather than someone who's older than you, because that's just how teenagers work. So yeah, I did that for my gold award, and so I figured I'm going to incorporate that into my seminar class. So we had to present our projects to a panel of judges, and or not a panel, but they walked around, they judged everybody's little projects that they did, and I had a couple people come up to mine. They were like, "Yeah, this is really cool, whatever." And I ended up winning an award for like being one of the highest ranked projects, but that was really exciting. And then one of the ladies offered me a job working for the Student Success Center, and that was like super cool. And then a couple weeks later, Todd reached out and was like, "Hey, I saw that your series that you did for your seminar project, and I think, you know, I have this idea for a vlog series at Northwest, and I'd like you to be a part of it." And from there, we kind of just had some meetings, and it was set in stone that I would be hosting along with Abram Schaefer, and we kind of paved the way for my Bearcat life.
I do feel like, again, more kind of on a personal note, like this has been really awesome for me, because I feel like in the course of our, 154 episodes, 6 seasons, you and I have gotten to know each other a lot more than we would have, through just having these conversations. Like, you just kind of get to do that, and then all the pre and post interview kind of stuff that goes along with it. So it's been nice for that, I think, too, just to kind of, especially when I moved from internship coordinator to assistant director. Our office is 3 feet away. Sometimes we can hear each other through the walls. but doing these podcasts, like, you don't necessarily get a chance to sit down and have that kind of conversation with your supervisor and do these kinds of things. So I feel like it's been really beneficial personally for that as well. And then, relearning the skills of video editing, which some of my former professors will tell you is not necessarily my strong suit as a student. It's been good to redo that as well.
Okay, well, do you have enough footage to make me a blooper reel?
Probably. I can probably do that.
That's what I would love.
Yes, so those early season bloopers were absolutely a thing.
But we had many bloopers.
We did. In the very first season, the last one is a clip show, and there are some montages I can kind of throw into this of me screwing up people's titles, which was a very common thing for really it was the first 3 seasons, 2 or 3 seasons, first couple anyway. We struggled with titles. So.
And today we have Stancy
Bond.
Senior, Stancy Bond.
James Bond.
Yes.
Stancy Bond.
Stancy Bond. And today we are joined by Lucy Hilliard, who is the graduate assistant for the International Affairs Office. Did I say
Involvement.
that?
International Involvement Center.
Yes. And today we are joined by Adam Gonzalez, who is a coordinator of Equity and Inclusion in the Northwest Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office.
No.
I've yet to get a title right. And today we are joined by Brian Swafford, who is the Director of Forensics at Northwest and an assistant professor.
No, senior instructor.
Senior instructor. And senior instructor in the School of Communication and Mass Media.
Good try, Travis.
Yes, titles are always such a challenge. They're all long and they don't really mean anything, but
that's why these subsequent seasons people introduce themselves, because if they can say their own title and we don't have to remember the 95 words that are in their crazy academic title. And then, yes, your gotchas and table slappings and things like that.
Gotcha.
You got so much better so quickly, though, for someone who didn't have, again, for someone who wasn't, in a major or an area where you did this, it is a little unnatural.
Yes, correct. Zero training. Let's be clear. Hannah learned on the job, on the fly, in the moment. So a little transparency there.
And I think you were a pro for that too, because again, you weren't just in the podcast, you were driving the podcast in 90% of the episodes. And the ones where you didn't were the ones that were rough. So I would say that. So, but yes, absolutely. There's lots of stuff there that we got better as we went through. And I think that's a lesson to folks, especially students who are thinking about starting a project or, maybe their own podcast or their own blog or their own, any kind of creative project is the first ones are going to be rough and you're going to look back when you're at the end and cringe. That's if you don't cringe, you didn't grow. Like I heard a YouTuber say, I think it was Marquise Brownlee said that like, that's part of the YouTube journey. If you don't look back at your early videos and feel like, oh, I could have done this, and this better, then you're not better than you were then. So that's part of it is getting more comfortable with it, honing your skills, figuring out what you're doing. Because no, if you got to figure it out from the beginning, what's the fun? Like that's the point, is to kind of make your way through it.
Well, I
So
think that
yes.
also paralyzes people.
Mhm.
I mean, especially people who haven't done a lot of creative work, you feel like you have some sort of expectation or
Mhm.
outcome that you're aiming toward. And the truth is it's all about repetition
Mhm.
and just keeping on going whenever you mess up and slap the table and,
Absolutely.
whatever, when it has to be cut out. So
Mhm.
I think, if I had to take away, if my one takeaway could come here, it would be everything that is worth doing is going to require you to take some risk. It doesn't matter if it's making a podcast, it doesn't matter if it's, applying for a position, if it's asking to interview a guest that you might not, otherwise get. I think everything is has some sort of risk. Everything worth doing has some sort of risk involved with it. And so really what you have to do is build up in whatever way, build up that risk tolerance so that you can get enough repetitions in so that you can have a good chance at accomplishing what you intend to accomplish. I think when we came together to do this, we were just like we really had no expectation in terms of production value. We were just like we're going to interview people, and we kind of knew that the production value would change over time as we got better at interviewing and got better at doing the technical side of things. And so I think it just happens naturally in some aspects like that. But that also is applicable to other areas of life, right? You got to go to interviews and get better at interviewing to be able to have a better chance of that. You got to, you just got to put yourself out there in the world and don't get frozen up by perfectionism and I don't know, self-doubt maybe.
Yeah, I'd say even taking that one step further into to embrace things that you feel like are failures too, because I mean, we had episodes that did
We
not
felt
go
like
the
we're
way we
failures.
wanted. Yeah. That at the end of the day, it's like, I'm going to put this out because, we owe it to the person to do it. But boy, this is not how I wanted it to go. And it's not the person's fault. It was, a technical issue where it was something with how we were doing it, or we were time constrained, because that's, especially the higher level positions, like trying to get an interview that could go on for an hour, but you only have 30 minutes like that. You can tell sometimes those conversations are a bit stymied. And I think that, learning from those things, and like we got better as we went, and those failures all led to future successes. And I think that's something I see, my children and college students that I interact with through this office and through, other phases of life. Like failures are, everybody's so afraid to fail that they miss the opportunity to grow from failure. So I think, not be afraid of risk for sure. And then realize if that risk doesn't work out and you fail, what can you learn from it? How can you get better? Like it's not the end of the world. Like again, we always have said that that's one of the nice things about career services is, we're the good guys. We're, our office, we don't deal with money. We don't deal with grades. We don't have to throw people out of school. We don't have to, send them a bill. So we're in a lovely spot where we get to be good news people. And it's like, maybe you didn't get the job, but you can get the next one. So I think that those learning from those things and not being afraid of risk or failure is really important. So, all right. Well, thank you for the last 6 seasons and 155 now episodes of Behind the Bearcat. And it's been an incredible journey. It's been very enjoyable. But it's also it's exciting to kind of see this come to an end and see what comes next. So, please stay with us, and we're always happy to answer questions, or if you have suggestions or ideas for videos, Career Services is always available for that. So thank you for that. And this has been the Behind the Bearcat podcast.